Everything Action presents Invasion USA by Jason Frost. Chapter 2. She began by unbuttoning her blouse. There was no other way. The cops were everywhere. "Christ, McGuire," she said to herself, looking out her car window. "Is there no limit with you?" She noticed some fatty in a business suit who'd been watching all the squad cars and ambulance pull up to the docks. He was eating donuts from a white bag. Now that he saw what she was doing, he turned and gaped. Powdered sugar spotted his chin, hung on his lapels like dandruff. She ignored him, continuing thumbing buttons through buttonholes. She shrugged out of her blouse and quickly unhooked the front of her bra. She shrugged out of that too. The fatty was staring at her with his tongue half hanging out of his mouth. She gave him a bored look, pretended to stick her thumb up her nose. He made a disgusted face and turned away. Occupational hazard, she thought with a laugh. She pulled her blouse back on and rebuttoned it, but only to the tip of the sternum. There had to be plenty of cleavage if this was going to work. She reached into the back seat, rooted among the 5 or 6 cameras there, selected a small 35mm Nikon and stuffed it into her purse. She climbed out of the car, adjusted her blouse for the most exposure, and began walking toward the young cop guarding the farthest perimeter from the action. She could see all the reporters bunched up near the dock entrance, bumping into each other as they pleaded and threatened with Lieutenant Green. He was shaking his head, probably telling them that they have to wait for an official statement from the department. They'd groan and say something about the First Amendment. He'd loosen his tie and walk away. "Grover," she called as she approached the young, bored-looking cop. "Here, Grover. Where are you, boy?" she whistled. The cop looked at her, a smile splitting his already cynical face. She pretended not to notice him. She bent over and called, "Grover," again. He stared down her blouse. "You see my dog?" she asked him. "No, ma'am." "Little dog? Part poodle? Part something I haven't been able to identify yet? Garbage disposal, I think." He grinned, reluctantly lifting his eyes from her breast to her face. He was obviously just as pleased with what he saw there. "Haven't seen him, sorry." "There he is," she said, pointing behind him. The young cop turned and looked. "Where? I don't see anything." "He ducked behind that ambulance. My goodness," she said, as if noticing all the squad cars in the ambulance the first time. "What's going on here?" His face got stony and professional. "Hope you find your dog, ma'am." "Me too, officer. He was a gift from my mother right before she died last month. Kind of a peace offering. Grover means a lot to me." His face softened slightly. "Yeah, well... Thing is, since we both saw him running over there, maybe I could just slip in and pick him up? I get right out of everyone's way. Poor Grover is probably sitting behind the car shivering with fear. He doesn't do so hot on his own. Not much of a watchdog either, but I live alone and, well, he's company." He looked at her, weighing the risks and possible rewards, letting his eyes wash over her breasts while he made up his mind. Finally stepped aside and lifted the rope. She ducked under it. She headed straight for the dock. "Thanks," she waved back to him. "You gotta find him and get right out again, okay?" "You kidding? I don't want to hang around with all this fuss. Might screw up my pacemaker." He gave her a funny look, but turned away and kept going, rebuttoning her blouse all the way up to her neck. Sneaking past the other uniformed cops was easy. Once you got this far, everyone figured you belonged. She saw the reporters still complaining and pleading for a story, knocking against each other like pigs in a chute. She smiled and climbed up on the pier. The focus of everyone's attention seemed to be the Coast Guard cutter at the end of the pier. Uniforms and plainclothes milled around the front of it, but no one went aboard. She saw Lieutenant Green talking to a couple of guys in dark suits and sunglasses. Harmon and Leeds from the FBI. Who else would be dumb enough to wear dark suits in the 78-degree Miami heat? They were all obviously waiting for someone. Him, the guy walking down the pier. The 3 men went over to meet this new guy. He wore expensive sunglasses, tinted a slightly reddish color. His hair was slicked back ghost style. His suit was lightweight and fashionable. $800 at least. He marched right by the 3 men, talking to them as he did. They fell in beside him. She ducked behind the fender of an ambulance, slipped a Nikon from her purse, and snapped a few shots at the men. Then she headed for the Coast Guard cutter. There were 2 cops at the gangplank. "Lieutenant Green on board?" she asked. "No," one of them answered. "Tell him I'll wait for him below deck." She patted her purse. "We don't want the chemicals he asked for out in the sun. Last time that happened, he chewed my butt out pretty bad." One of the cops chuckled at that. "Yeah, I've got a few tooth marks myself. We'll tell him." She hurried up the gangplank. Once on deck, she looked around, but there was nothing unusual. As soon as she went out below deck, she pulled out the camera again and began snapping everything she saw. So far, nothing looked out of place, until she stepped into the galley. Her throat immediately contracted, as if it didn't want the same air that was in this room. Her stomach lurched, recalling the shrimp salad she had for lunch. She forced herself to relax, take deep breaths, concentrate on the camera, the photographs. She raised the camera to her right eye and pressed the shutter button. The 20 dead men on the floor didn't mind. They were bound and gagged, 5 of them in their underwear, uniforms missing. All had bullet holes through their heads, execution style. Fat black flies were buzzing around the room in giddy circles. Occasionally they would land and nibble at someone's wound. She swallowed and snapped another picture. Suddenly a large arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her backwards out of the room. A hand snatched her camera away. "You know better, Dahlia," Lieutenant Green said, releasing her, but keeping the camera. "Come on, Lieutenant, give a working girl a break." Lieutenant Green opened the back of the camera and exposed the film. "That line ever work, Dahlia?" She grinned. "Sometimes, if they're young enough, and I'm wearing that skirt with the slit up to here," she said, tapping her tie. "Yeah, I know that, the one. My favorite." "Why, Lieutenant," she smiled, "you dirty old man." He handed her back the exposed film. She sighed. "Do any good to mention the First Amendment?" "You'll have to wait for an official statement like all the other reporters." He guided her out the galley. The two FBI guys and the third man, the one in charge, were waiting in the hall. She took pictures, Lieutenant Green said. "Hi, Leeds. Hi, Harmon," she said to the agents. "How's tricks of the FBI? You two get your wiretapping merit badges yet?" The man in the expensive suit and tinted glasses frowned. "Who's this bimbo?" "Bimbo?" she hollered. "Listen, asshole." Lieutenant Green stepped between them. "Whoa, hold on here," he turned to the man. "This is Dahlia McGuire, reporter of the Herald. She's a pain in the ass, but she's fair. Most of the time I'd just as soon throw her skinny butt in jail as give her the time of day, but I won't have you come around here bad-mouthing her. You want to work with me? Fine. I've got orders to cooperate. But once you're finished up here and blown back to where you came from, we'll still have to live here and work with these people. So you show some respect. Got me?" The man in the suit stared at Lieutenant Green, then at Harmon and Leeds. Their blank expressions showed they agreed with Lieutenant Green. The man in the suit nodded curtly, turned and climbed back up on the deck. The two agents followed. "Hey, thanks, Lieutenant," Dahlia McGuire said. "That was nice. So what's going on here? Who killed these guys? Where are the uniforms? Some kind of drug deal? And what's the scoop on the pretty boy in the suit? CIA?" Lieutenant Green scowled at her. "Shut up, McGuire." She followed him up the stairs to the deck. When they got there, the guy in the suit whispered something to Lieutenant Green. He nodded. "Wait down there, McGuire," the lieutenant said. "What for?" she demanded. "For questioning. After all, you are trespassing on government property. I'm going to have to hold you for questioning." "Come on, Lieutenant. That's a crock and you know it." Lieutenant Green smiled. "Right now it's for questioning. You want to try for arrest?" Dahlia McGuire swore under her breath and still stomped back down the stairs. As soon as she heard the door slam behind her, she tiptoed back up the stairs and pressed her ear to the door. She could barely hear what they were saying. "What do you make of it, gentlemen?" the guy in the suit was asking. "Maybe just drugs," Agent Harmon said. Lieutenant Green snorted. "No way, this was planned too well. Sure, drugs may be involved, but I think there's more to it, a bigger score down the line. Too many small signs. Plus, you wouldn't be here if you didn't know something you're not telling us." There was a pause, and Dahlia shifted her ear for better hearing. "What do you think, Adams?" Agent Leeds finally asked. The man in the suit sighed. "Lieutenant Green is correct. There's something more going on here, but I can't tell you what it is yet." "Terrific," Lieutenant Green said. "We gotta work in the dark on this while you guys at Langley play your cards close to the vest. Terrific." "No choice, Lieutenant. National security." "That phrase has lost some credibility lately, pal." "Nonetheless, that's our position," Adams said. "What now?" Lieutenant Green asked. "The three of you continue your investigation as you normally would. Meanwhile, I'll call in a specialist." "A what?" "Someone who knows how to deal with the kind of people who would do something like this. Unofficially." "Unofficially go after a bunch of killers? You know someone like that, huh?" Adams hesitated. When he spoke, Dahlia thought his voice sounded grim. "Maybe. Just maybe."